Hey friends, in our podcast today, we're going to talk about what one author is calling the politics of panic. When you look at the left, they're not running on a platform, they're really running on hatred. Everything's being escalated to being a crisis of existential proportion, and if we don't win in this next election, what is going to happen? We're going to lose democracy forever and ever and ever. You never hear any policy. All you see is hatred. All you see is alarm. All you see is scare tactics. We're going to talk about how the left is using that right now to their advantage. We're going to give you a bunch of examples from our culture about how that's happening. But we did have some really, really good news. The Supreme Court came down with a ruling that is huge in regards to racism and drawing fair maps so that when it comes to national elections, your vote and my vote are properly, administered. We're going to talk about that in our podcast today. I think you're going to really enjoy it.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Here we are again. We're going to pepper you guys with a lot of important things that are happening, and we always like to start by talking about what's happening right here at home at Living Stone. Sunday was a big day. We haven't got any totals yet, but big day. We are at our 1-year anniversary, and we have been encouraging our folks to pray about investing. A lot of new folks at our church pray about investing, or so many people have had already answers to prayer and saying, hey, why not get some more good answers to prayer? Yeah. But we're looking to add on that total that we had, which was over the, 8 million mark in pledges. Yep. Love to see that get up to 9 or 10 million. And if that's the case, we're going to be sitting really, really great in terms of this building rebuild, the renovation. So appreciate everybody who was a part of that.
Yeah, it was a great Sunday yesterday. Pastor Aaron did a great job about recommitment for us all come together and ask the Lord what is his heart for us to give towards the building project.
Yeah. Saw lots of people responding. It's always a great moment. We have people come forward, and I saw the nice big buckets there. Again, I'm saying I saw because I was watching online Sunday. You guys can continue to pray for my back situation that gets healed. Yeah. And I got to see the foyer for the first time, on my way over here today for the podcast. That's looking great. Yeah. Of course, next Sunday is Mother's Day. And we'll be also giving, if you didn't get a chance to pick up one of those cards or even get online, go to our Church Center app, you could pledge there. For those of you who are watching, faithful folks who watch every week, we appreciate you. And maybe some of you would say, hey, we'd love to participate in what God's doing at Living Stones. That's a way that you can do that. But this Sunday, honoring our mamas. And that's always a big day at Living Stones. We like to really roll the red carpet out for the ladies.
Our family's our thing, right? Absolutely. Marriages and families are thing. So you can't have marriages and families without mama. So there's a tender
spot in our heart for the mamas out there. So anyway, we hope you'll come, and we look forward to celebrating everything that day entails. So I wanted to get us kicked off on a great article that I came across on social media. This is by Michael Smith. Saw this on Facebook. It's called The Politics of Panic. And we've talked about this before on this podcast. It seems like in this election cycle, the Democrats' strategy is very simple. It's hate Trump. Hate everything Trump's doing. If we were to ask, what is the Democratic platform at this point in terms of ideas or principles? I think you'd be hard-pressed to come up with anything. They're not really running a campaign on what they're for. They're really running a campaign on what they're against or who they hate. And I feel like in this article, again, The Politics of Panic, he said the one thing that keeps coming up before anything ideological comes out is fear. This is a fear-based effort on the Democrat side. And he says here the typical Democratic voter. And by the way, this is Monday when we're recording, and I know Thursday you're watching this, and we'll have already gone through midterms and even some of the local,
not the midterms, but
the
primaries.
The primaries, getting set up for the midterms. And again, we have a couple great candidates here from Living Stones running for Senate.
I already voted. I voted last Friday. Last Friday morning. In and out. Took me 2 seconds to the governor's Senate.
Well, that could be good or it could be bad.
Yeah.
As you all know, when you have a primary setting up the midterm, that's usually a pretty low attended voter turnout. So it means that if you get people out, you can win, and you don't have to have as many votes as in the general election in the fall. But this is true of all voters. Most of them are not, as he called here, ideologues. Like, most people aren't in the weeds on all the policy issues and stuff like that. And they're not really paying attention until like a week or two before the election. And so he makes the point here, Americans are busy, distracted, and only intermittently engaged, which I think is true. Most people are not political animals. He says what they respond to is not a fully formed ideological framework or worldview, but a steady emotional narrative. And increasingly, he says that narrative is built on fear. He brings out a point here that the modern Democratic coalition, this is the communication that's coming out of the coalition. He says things like they're killing democracy, they're pedos, rapists, bigots, and every sort of phobic demon that one could conjure. It's a war now, a war tomorrow, and a war forever. He says the messaging is not about persuading voters toward a set of principles. It's about defining the opposition in the starkest possible terms and stoking resistance. And when you are fighting for survival, he points out nothing is forbidden. The Republican Party is not framed as wrong or misguided or even flawed. Those are things that you could argue about. He says it's framed as dangerous, an existential threat, not just to policy preferences, but to democracy itself, to basic rights, and to personal safety. Let's talk about that a little bit, because we talked about we're living in a day where political violence is being encouraged by the left, and I think that kind of explains it. If you're simply operating out of fear, and it doesn't do any good to talk to people about the nuances of policy or whatever, because fear just makes you freak out.
It's a great attention clear. I mean, there's what they call it, clickbaits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the world's ending in 25 days.
Yep. Well, isn't that what the whole, global warming and all the climate hysteria is about? We're all going to die.
Well, I was listening to Michael Saylor. He's a crypto guy, but he was talking about how all these dangers are coming up. He says there's a term, I forgot the term he used, that actually talks about how the supposed cure for the danger that you probably won't ever face is much worse than the cure itself.
Exactly.
He mentioned global warming, and none of those things happen. But he says, if you say there's a hurricane that's coming towards Florida and, there's a 5% chance it might be a category 5 and we got to kind of be careful and blah, blah. You have a reason, measure, scientific view, no one will care.
Right.
You say there's a hurricane coming and there's a chance it'll wipe out Miami.
Right.
All of a sudden it's go viral.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
It is how you frame it and how you set it up. And the problem is it's hard to live in a culture where everything's a crisis. Every day you have a new crisis to worry about.
Yeah. You got to escalate the crisis to because the baseline is crisis. So you got to be everyone's competing for the highest crisis.
And remember during COVID, I mean, some news stations went as low as to point up like death tolls every day, like it was rolling numbers, you know, just to create a constant sense of crisis and hysteria. Yep. He says this, and I thought this was a good point. Fear is efficient. It clarifies, focuses, and creates a sense of urgency out of complexity. If the other side is merely mistaken, then there's room for debate or compromise or indifference. But if the other side is cast as malignant, if they are portrayed as actively seeking to harm, then disagreement becomes a moral imperative. He says up to and including the assassination of a sitting U.S. president. I thought that was really, really good point. It's hard to wrestle through the nuances of policy issues and think about
extremely complicated
outcomes or whatever. It's easy just to say those guys are bad.
They're evil.
Yeah, do whatever it takes to stop them, including, shooting at the president 3 different times. He says the dynamic creates a useful form of cohesion. Leaders do not need every voter to understand the intricacies of policy or the philosophical underpinnings of progressive thought. He says they need voters to feel that the stakes are high and the opposition is unacceptable. And once that emotional baseline is established, policy becomes secondary and loyalty follows naturally, not because of agreement on every issue, but because the alternative has been rendered unthinkable. Again, I thought that was a brilliant analysis. We're not looking for cohesion. We don't have to agree on everything. We just have to agree on you have to stop the other side. That is the existential threat. And I thought this was good, and we can move on after this. He says, fearful people seek a safe harbor and strong protection. Each new story, each new headline reinforces the same underlying theme. The other side is not just different, they're dangerous. And I think that really captures it. Our side is somehow dangerous and must be stopped at all costs.
I think to a degree, both Republicans and Democrats do it. Almost every business, to a certain degree, uses
it. It's a sales technique.
It's a sales technique. It's a marketing. If you don't buy now, we're going to be out of sale. I would say the Democrats have taken this to the nth level because of demographic shift, because all these different things we want to talk about, they are losing power. And they're grasping it, and they are shifting really hard to, hey, they're going to ruin the economy, to they are the most vile, worst people in the world, and they deserve to die. I mean, I really think that's the verbiage. That's what's going on.
Oh, you've seen things on social media, too, that says, you voted for Donald Trump, and he's this, and this. And again, they use the same critique, and he's a racist. Well, that hasn't been proven. He's a child abuser. That's not been proven. The list goes on and on and on. So the idea is I can't even associate with you, even to the point of family members. I mean, it's gotten to be completely crazy. But to your point, and to this author's point, we just saw where educators and school administrators single-handedly canceled school for 700,000 North Carolina students so that they could go out and protest against the president. They were waving signs around the street, and this is the message on the signs. F ICE, defeat Trump's agenda, Trump is a Nazi, ICE out, protect trans kids, refuse fascism, stop bombing our schools. I didn't know any schools were being bombed by the president. And he says, don't tell me this is about kids. It never was. This was adults using 700,000 children, including his own, which he was ticked about because he didn't even know about this parent, as political leverage against a president that they don't like. This is despicable. Again, to think about taking our kids out of school, handing them a sign that says F Trump, and having them march up and down the streets without you even knowing as a parent that this is a leftist progressive teachers union that's gotten out of control. I mean, I'd be furious if that happened. But again, this is what we're dealing with on the left. It is a crisis, so much so we're going to shut down the schools to stop this president and to stop his agenda. Another one that I thought was incredibly interesting. This is Kate Wilson, the new Seattle mayor, who is a leftist and a progressive. This is how bad it's getting in Seattle when Starbucks, that is no conservative,
right,
business at all. I remember a few years ago when at their board of directors meeting or shareholders meeting, somebody raised concern that they were promoting the gay agenda or same-sex marriage, and basically they were told, if you don't like it, sell your stock. I mean, this is no conservative country or company. They have had it because, of course, the leftist progressives are for tax. So Starbucks has announced they are moving to Nashville. They're taking 2,000 jobs at an average pay of $125,000 per year. They're closing down 5 stores in Seattle area, and they're taking $750 million in tax revenue with them. She was recently asked at a meeting that she was holding at a university, she was asked about this behavior, not only Starbucks, but a lot of millionaires leaving Seattle, and her response was one word. She waved at the camera and said, bye. In other words, her ideology, she doesn't care about the facts. She doesn't care about how businesses can't make money anymore. She doesn't care about the facts that taxing these people is actually stealing their money because they have to do their fair share or whatever. And we talked about this. If you own a business in Seattle, you're not going to stay there. You're not going to work for nothing. You're certainly not going to work to hand over your profits to the government to redistribute your hard-earned wealth. No one does that. I mean, it's insane. And so it should not come as a surprise to those of us who get it that all of these millionaires are leaving. And where are they going? They're going to red states. They're going to states where they're not, like Florida, where there is no income tax or sales tax or whatever.
Yeah, sales tax. Yeah.
So anyway, but this is typical of the progressives, this little smarty pants, who cares? We're going to stay true to our ideology, even though your ideology makes no sense and leads to bankruptcy, leads for people leaving. So again, the irony of this, that a liberal paragon kind of business like Starbucks would have to leave Seattle because it's too progressive, it's too wacko, it's too out there.
Well, progressiveness sounds good until it reflects your tax policy, until that you're going to be taxed, like in California, unrealized gains on your business or your investment. All of a sudden, all these progressive who donate to these progressive causes are thinking, wait a second, because you know what? I don't care what your progressive view is. 1 + 1 is still 2.
Well, and you pointed this out before. This is a clash between the business world, which deals with real numbers, to the political ideologue world, which doesn't even believe, doesn't even operate in reality. I mean, these are business guys looking at the books and looking at what they're looking at. I think it was a 9.9% tax or something like that on people in the highest, tax bracket. And they're looking at the numbers going, we can't even function here. We cannot run a business and make money here. So we have to leave. And these folks going, hey, so what? We're just going to live in our progressive bubble.
Rich, wealthy people, smart people, they can recognize they're going to optimize the situation so they get maximum profitability. These guys are not billionaires because they were like, you know what, we'll get by breaking even. That's not how this works. The billionaires, because they maximize profit, and they will seek out the place that helps them maximize their profit. So
absolutely.
That's how.
And what's sad is this is where they don't get it. They're not only going to leave for their own personal benefit, but what happens is they just gave up 2,000 good-paying jobs in Seattle. So, and not because they want to stick it to their employees. They don't. They want to care for their employees, but they just can't make the numbers work. And so this is what's sad. They sit in their ivory tower little bubbles of progressive nonsense, and they're acting like it's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. That's just one company and $750 million that just walked out of your city. Now you have to go, budget your accounts, balance your accounts, and it'd be hard if you just lost $750 million. Like, where does that money come from? Where's that money going to be replaced? It's not, because you got a bunch of people living off a government in Seattle and other liberal strongholds like that, and it's all going to hit the fan. And I don't know what they're going to do when they all go bankrupt. But that's the sad part. Yeah. You're losing great jobs and good people. Also, this isn't not in any of our printed notes here, but the fact that it was Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren who largely destroyed the merger between Spirit Airlines and what was the other airlines? Another discount airlines.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were going to come together because they were not able to make it on their own. And they said, oh, no, we don't want collusion. And so here again, instead of the government keeping its nose out of the private sector, they decide they have to come in and kill a private business deal. And now, because they were concerned about limited flights and, blah, 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 blah. And now they've just killed all those jobs because those airlines had to shut down. They're not even in operation anymore. So this irks me again when we see the government putting their fingers involved in private business market, which they shouldn't do. They should have the minimal, investment or interest in what's going on.
Well, the issue is, and I'm not familiar with the airline issue. But in general, these government bureaucrats have never run businesses themselves. They don't understand. They don't know how to read a profit and loss sheet. They don't know the nuances of development and leadership. They don't understand that sometimes to make profit, you got to follow through. You got to be on time. You can't just rely on, principle. You got to align yourself with reality. So we got bureaucrats. That's generally what they mean by bureaucrats. The government bureaucrats who are grown in this world, which has placed by different rules. Where in the business world, you got to play by real rules of physics and economics. And they go in there and they start interfering with it. And the business people are like, I'm out. So my opinion is I want great business guys who made their money, who says, you know what, I'm going to take a loss or I'm going to have to sell my stocks, go in the government because they actually understand the business world to go and make sure, hey, everything's clean and not corrupt. I mean, I like that perspective.
Wouldn't it be great if we could have a president who came from a business background instead of who was a career politician who really understood how to make money?
Yeah, who knows how to negotiate, who understands economics.
Man, I wonder who we could have that could be that kind of president.
That's what Trump did. He has all these business guys in his administration. He has these guys who I would not really necessarily select, but they know their field. They know AI. They know economics. They understand all these different things. They understand how to negotiate dealing with these big moving parts.
So do you trust Cory Booker or Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris to be an expert on economic policy, or would you actually trust somebody who's been a successful business person? Yeah. I mean, again, that's why when people are getting concerned about some of the economic moves, I'm sitting here going, this guy understands the economy better than anybody in the White House. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he knows how to get the economy up and running, and he has. I mean, he was digging out of a deep hole dug by.
Well, GDP's doing great right now.
Joe Biden,
but like Scott Bessent, who is again a guy I wouldn't think to be a Treasury Secretary, but he understands that world so well. He made his billions doing that.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Anyways,
well, and moving on here because we want to get to a big Supreme Court ruling, but this was a really important thing. The Justice Department came out with a task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And I really like, by the way, this acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. He's getting some stuff done.
He's getting stuff done. Yeah.
I really like it. But this was a report. This was a 550-page report detailing abuses across the federal government. It was called Eradicating Anti-Christian Bias Within the Federal Government. And Tony Perkins writes here that it lays bare what is at the heart of the left's disdain for religious freedom. It is a clash of worldviews over abortion, gender ideology, and sexual orientation. Now, I like the way that he addresses this because it is a clash of worldviews. I had the pleasure of coming in and having a meeting with a former governor, all of the pro-life, pro-family groups, and we tried to share with our former governor, this was several administrations ago, that there's no coming together of the LGBT pro-abortion worldview with a Christian worldview. So you can't negotiate, you can't find common ground because there is no common ground. We start with different presuppositions about God, about reality, about life, about where the problems come from, about how to fix the problem. So there's no coming together on those two worldviews. And I think Tony Perkins points out a good point here. This 550-page report says the foundation for why the anti-Christian bias is happening, pervasive in the Biden administration, why it's a threat to our nation. He starts out by quoting George Washington, and he says this: of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And I won't read the whole quote, but basically Tony's point is government shouldn't be attacking Christians and Christian organizations. They should be protecting Christian organizations and Christian viewpoint because without them, you can't succeed as a nation. And what the Biden administration was doing, and I'll just be brief on this, but they were basically operating under the lie that religious liberty means you can practice your faith in the four walls of your church, but you're not allowed to bring your faith anywhere that's public. And of course, we know that's not what the founders understood religious liberty to be. We should be able to take our faith anywhere in America, and we should not have to worry that the federal government is actually going after us or attacking us. And yet that's exactly what the Biden administration was proved to be doing, attacking pro-lifers, attacking teachers who were standing up, wouldn't use the right pronouns, all that kind of stuff. And I just encourage people, again, as a national election, the national midterms come up here in November, get registered to vote, get out and vote, because we don't want to go and live under that kind of tyranny that we were experiencing for 4 years under the Biden administration. So anyway, important stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's really a zero-sum game, because I think Hillary Clinton mentioned, you have freedom of worship, not the freedom of religion. In that context, freedom of worship is you can express whatever you want within a certain context.
Or keeping it in the recesses of your own mind. You just can't express it.
But that's a fallacy in itself, because every law is religious in nature. Every policy passed is religious in nature. So they're basically saying, you Christians, your religion is lower than our religion. So again, like those principles will never work, because it doesn't fit reality.
Yep.
So really that's what's said, but the true foundation is power. We want power. Our religion gives us more power. Our religion is really power and money. That's really what we worship, right? Therefore, we're going to degrade you and attack your religion and say, hey, your religion only belongs in this circle, but my religion we're bullying your religion. But no one wants to say that. That's actually what's happening. And these documents prove it.
You brought out a great talking point, though, that helps all of us as believers. As soon as you have somebody telling you, excuse me, you're not allowed to share your faith, or excuse me, separation of church and state, or whatever, at that very point, they are preaching their religion, and they are violating what they say they believe. In other words, the internal consistency of their argument just explodes upon itself, because, as we pointed out, you cannot open your mouth without operating from your religious worldview. You can't say anything. And so for them to attack Christians is clearly a worldview bias. It's them, as you pointed out, elevating their worldview, secularism, or whatever you want to call it, progressivism, over our worldview. So at that point, this is why it's important. Somebody's worldview is going to be dictating the laws of our land and our policy and everything. We're going to argue that let's go back to the fact that we are a Christian nation founded upon Christian principles. And you don't have to go any farther than George Washington's address, laying the foundation that if we don't have a Christian worldview, that we don't have a pillar to support the rest of what happens in government. You have to have some type of religion and morality that supports everything that you do in government.
And what I really want is for those who says, hey, we're going to reject your Christian worldview, we reject your pro-life. What is your comprehensive religion we're going to accept instead?
Yeah, what's the alternative?
What is the religion you want? Is it Islam? Is it secularism, communism? Because those Democrats have never come out and said it. They have attacked Christians. Once again, they tell you what they're against, but they don't tell you what they're for. Because if they actually come out and said what they're for, what religion or philosophy they're really for, Marxism, how popular is that going to be? Yeah. Child sacrifice, how popular is that going to be? They don't want to put words to it.
Did you see, I think it was Representative, is it Brandon Gill? I can't think of his last name.
Sounds familiar.
Anyway,
yeah.
he was interviewing or questioning, one of the Planned Parenthood type people, and he simply asked this question: What is your favorite? He asked her, "What is your favorite form of abortion?" And she said, well, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about access to reproductive rights. And he said, no, that's what is reproductive rights. It's aborting the baby. So which form of abortion do you favor? And then he would read the first type of abortion. He said, do you favor that? She wouldn't give an answer. Then he read the second type of abortion graphically. Then he read the third type of abortion. Then he read the fourth type of abortion, and she wouldn't answer his question. And he says, I know why you won't answer the question, because it's really hard to face the facts, and it's really a vile and despicable thing that you would support the murder of babies. And it was a perfect setup, because he forced her to get beyond the euphemisms reproductive health or whatever, and to actually talk about what was taking place, how those babies were being murdered. And he called it what it is. He called it vile and despicable. And he made her face the facts that that's what your worldview supports. This, I think, is what we're talking about. We have to stop letting them get a pass because they're attacking us and trying to get the moral high ground. And we need to fire right back and expose them for what they're standing for, which is vile and despicable. Why don't you introduce the very, very important Supreme Court ruling that just came down as it relates to redistricting, a big issue.
Yeah, so the case is Louisiana versus Calais. The court ruled 6-3 that the Louisiana congressional map, the one that created a second majority black or majority minority district, was unconstitutional. Why? Because race was the predominant factor used to draw that map. The justice says that this violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Okay. So basically, we cannot create race-based congressional districts. In other words, the justification for that district cannot be based on race. And this is kind of the irony of people that are calling us racist, is this policy is racist. It's saying we have to create special districts that are based on the color of a person's skin, which is racism. And so we're trying to get rid of the racism. So I think this was Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that basically said you can't create race-based congressional districts. So this has massive implications for the midterm, for instance.
Well, so basically what it's shown us is since the Civil Rights Act, many districts, especially in southern states, have been gerrymandered to create majority-minority districts.
So you bring out the word gerrymander, which is important because if you look at some of these maps, they are this convoluted, crazy borders. They're not like nice square districts. They're all squiggly because they're actually dipping into certain minorities in those areas to create one pure homogeneous race-based district that's actually illegal.
Well, absolutely. The idea that, only someone of your exact race can truly represent you is not biblical, right? We're called to judge people by the content of their character, right? Not the color of their skin. So to say, hey, you know what? Like, we're going to have a Asian guy, so you got to group all the Asian people in this area, and you need to have an Asian person represent you. It's like, no, I don't care if this guy's Asian or not. I want to know what policies he's advocating. I want to know what values he espouses.
Right.
Whether he's Asian or not doesn't mean he represents me or not.
And of course, the left, brings up and says this is racist, but they forget the fact that, Barack Obama was elected to 2 terms, and the black population is only 12 to 13% in America. So we're talking about a lot of people from other races, in particular white people, who put Barack Obama into office. And I would like to suggest that we've actually gone backwards in race relations since Obama was put into office, and people people who are using race as a wedge to maintain power. But this is something, again, and pointed out here in this article, 2/3 of black House members already serve in districts that are not racially drawn majorities. And so we already have a lot of people who are getting elected into office in America today that are not suffering from racism. In fact, just the opposite is true.
Yeah, and I think the Supreme Court is essentially saying that creating this type of policy, this type of district actually creates more tension between the races. It causes more problem, versus having a blank state and say, hey, you know what, let's be colorblind about our districts and vote for the person with the best character and the best policies.
No, and again, when I think of folks like Martin Luther King Jr., that was what he said, and it was right on. It was rooted in a Judeo-Christian worldview that we should not be judging people on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. We've gone completely backwards from that movement, the start of that movement, to where now everything is about the color of our skin.
Well, let's go back to what we talked about last week, maybe, about SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah. But just how lucrative it was for them to incentivize and push racism narratives.
Some of these organizations that were created out of the civil rights movement, that's exactly what they do. If you are not creating racism, fostering it, perpetuating it, then you're out of a job. And there's a lot of money to be made in these types of situations, which is sad. There's a whole industry that's been created based upon race and other progressive ideologies that would actually go out of business if we weren't stirring it up constantly.
Industry, politicians who are elevated to a certain area because they spout those views, they talk about it. Again, it's fear-mongering. It's a fear-based perspective. It gets the attention. When you throw the ism out there, all of a sudden people hear and they elevate it and they raise you up and they cast you down. These are very, very powerful weapons they use, especially in the social media age.
And I was reading an opinion piece that I thought was really good. It was talking about reparations and how we're already dishing out reparations, not in the way that we would think, but for instance, all these DEI, CRT, these are programs that get implemented in university settings. And there's a whole cottage industry. When you say, well, you have to go to sensitivity training, there's groups that's what they do. They create the videos that our students are forced to watch to promote tolerance or whatever, but it's all race-based. It's all DEI, CRT stuff. And that's a huge cottage industry where millions of taxpayer dollars go to support all of that. So people are getting paid back for racism because this has all been, embedded in our university systems, which is sad. But okay, so you were pointing out this happened in Louisiana. So Louisiana is forced to redraw those maps because
I believe
they're
Louisiana needs to redraw their map to make sure that they're not following these things. And what it does, it doesn't abolish, let me read the specific, it doesn't eliminate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. It simply says states cannot be forced to draw district primary based on race. So it opens the door for many southern red states to go in there, go back to look at how they draw their district and says we are no longer forced to have to draw these majority minority districts. So now we're opening the door to all kind of things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it says here, the Supreme Court decision pushes back against that division. It tells states they can now draw fairer, more community-focused maps using race-neutral principles. And analysts believe this could shift several House seats in future cycles as maps become more compact and less engineered by race. And I love the quote here. The best way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race, which is what...
Is that what Alito said? Justice Alito?
I can't see who they're quoting here. It might have been Jeff Landry, the governor, or the governor of Louisiana.
Okay. Yeah.
But he says this is the governor of Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee, who's also looking to redraw their maps. And I like what he says here. This is why elections have consequences. He said this should give us one extra seat and help save our country from the radical left Democrats and their country-destroying policies of high tax, open borders, transgender mutilization, defunding the police, ICE, and Border Patrol, no voter ID, soft on crime, and so much more. So these are the policies that are happening, at the federal level. This is why what happens at the state level impacts, of course, what happens at the federal level. When you have people like we just had in Indiana who fail to redistrict, and I'm just talking about not gerrymander, but redistrict, drawing different lines that could have got us 2 more seats. Now we're dealing with who has the majority and who gets to set the policy from the national level. And this is huge. Some of those issues that he just brought up, like, do we think the police departments are important? The gal in Seattle wants to cut the budget of the police department in half because they don't think they need police out in Seattle. We all, so do you want to have weak on crime, weak law enforcement, and all the open border stuff? Is this what we really want as Americans? I think the answer is no, but that's what we get when our state legislatures don't do what they need to do. Yeah. And that's why when we drop the ball here in Indiana, it's such a big deal. It's why we have so many of our current senators being primaried, which again hardly ever happens when you're the incumbent. But we're seeing that happen because this was a major short-sighted dropping of the ball.
Well, this stuff exposed, first of all, like how for decades, a lot of these states have representatives that shouldn't represent them because they were forced to draw a district in an unconstitutional way. But furthermore, in the 2020 census, many of the census was already skewed because of they counted illegals. They counted
exactly
wrongly. So again, like all these reasons means that we have to push back. We can't just passively say, okay, whatever you count, whatever is going to be. Oh, whatever these, how Illinois draws that district through, like we're going to just let it be, and we're going to like we're as a voter, which we're playing a zero-sum game. I'm expecting my representative to represent me in the ways that we are not just sitting passively. I don't care you sit in a supermajority. I don't care that, hey, you know what? You have your nice Republican country club, blah, blah, blah. I want you to act. I want you to represent us and do something about this inequality. Fundamental. Look what happened in Virginia. I'm from Virginia. Yeah. I can't stand what's happening in Virginia. I hope the Supreme Court of Virginia does something about it.
And there are certain states that we tend to think of as liberals, like Illinois. But it's a mischaracterization because of gerrymandering. A lot of these states that I would view liberal, like even in the Northeast, they have up to 40% of their population
and zero reps, Republican
no representation. That is wrong. So we're talking about having to correct some of the. Even California. Yeah. I mean, California was a big Republican state, and look at it now. Yeah. Why is that the case? Well, it's because of a couple of things: gerrymandering, and because of allowing anybody breathing, and even a few that aren't, to vote. Because they don't have voter ID and all that stuff. So again, this isn't like Republicans fighting back, playing dirty. This is like Republicans trying to draw clean lines and clean up the voter rolls so we don't have dead people voting, and have voter ID so we don't have illegals voting. It's just all this work to get back to playing fair again, so we actually have the kind of representation that we need. And I think it skews in most people's minds what's happening even in the nation. We get this idea that there's this growing progressive population that's trying to take over America. I think that is way blown out of proportion because of the media and because of these bad maps and bad elections that have been stolen. I don't really feel like that's as big as we think it is. I think it's smaller, and I think there still are a majority of people who
well-funded group of people.
Yeah, there you go.
For protest and outrage.
Yeah, and they manipulate even our school systems and our kids for one thing, and that's just power.
Power centers. Yeah.
And so, man, we're preaching to the choir. We can't tell you to get out and vote because it's going to come out on Thursday, and you already should have got out and vote. But make sure that we're getting ready, for this national election that's coming up, because ideas do have consequences. And I failed to mention, we also have on the line here for this election, we've got people who are running for delegate. All right. And so there's a lot of folks from our church family, including myself, who are running for delegates. So when you're out voting, again, you won't be voting. It's coming late. But I hope everybody voted for Living Stones folks, because there's a lot of them on that list for running for delegate. So in our next podcast, we'll be able to tell how we did.
Yeah.
So until then, thank you guys for watching. We'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday.